Jeff, you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Devin, you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, we're waiting for Keith. He's probably... Jeff, you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Devin, you still there?
Yep, I'm here. If one of you guys have got your your Facebook up, you might want to turn the volume down on that. That's where the feedback is coming from. If one of you guys have got your
all right, I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
You might want to turn the volume down on that. That's where the feedback is coming from. One of you guys have got your
all right, I'm trying to figure out how to do that. How's that? That should kill it. All right, I'm trying to figure out how to do that. How's that, guys? Clean?
That sounds a lot better, yeah.
Jeff?
Yep.
Okay. This is live because I see people chatting.
Oh yeah, it's you've got the splash screen, the standby screen up on Facebook, and it's running just smooth.
It gives us enough time to schmuck things up. Okay, give me a second. I'm going to mute everybody until I get Keith on here, which will be any second.
Okay. I can't see anybody, but it looks like everybody can see me.
Okay, well, no one should be able to see you since...
oh, I can hear you.
Yeah, I have everyone muted. We're waiting for you. We just have the lock and load play stand by until we get everything ready.
Okay. I got I have some graphics for you.
Email them to me.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to mute everybody again.
All right.
Okay, guys, the mics are live.
Hey.
And I'm going to start off the countdown, and we'll go from there.
All right, let me get you some graphics here. Attach.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to On the Air with Lock and Load Publishing. We are here to have a great time and discuss everything from games, designs, production, to simply what's on our minds. We let you know what has us excited in the gaming industry and what's next for Lock and Load Publishing. Grab your helmets. This show starts right now.
Hey everybody, welcome to the first, hopefully much better produced show of Walking Republic Live.
Look at all these people.
I don't see anybody. This is good.
You don't want to see us anyway.
All right. What we're going to do, guys, is if I don't know if you've been read what the idea of the show is. The idea of the show is to have us talking about a particular subject or subjects, and not only have you guys participate, but also, maybe even join us online. Okay? We do have a full panel today. We got Jeff Schulte. Devin, how you pronounce your last name, please?
Heinle.
Heinle. See, you didn't put your Heinle name down there.
I know. I'll fix that next time.
He's used to it.
All right. And then
He knows who he is.
We got Keith, and we're going to talk about Lock and Load today. We did do this about a little over a week ago. Or was it a week ago?
It was a week or two.
A
week or two ago, yeah.
It wasn't like a Sunday. It was an odd day. So.
Okay. Well, the basic gist of this is we're going to talk basically on Lock and Load World at War 85. Okay, and we're going to talk about some of the newer and unique features of the game. Okay, we're going to answer some of your questions, which I'm now trying to read, and just give you updates. Okay, and I'm just looking for anything. King and Country, module. And at the end, guys, if you want to ask us about something about Lock and Load Tactical or Nations at War or my sexy new haircut, whatever, all you got to do is basically put it up there. All right. I guess, Keith, you're sending me some graphics to get ready for, right?
Yeah, I sent you a few. I'm working on another one.
All right. So I guess we'll have to start off with Jeff and talking about the I guess it'll be the campaign system.
Sure. So coming out with the Storming the Gap, we have the Drive on Giessen campaign. It comes with a operational map, so to speak, covering the section of Pull the Gap from basically Eisenach in East Germany.
And I'm going to send an overlay to you, David, for that.
Okay.
That's my second email.
Sure. And then out to Giessen, which is north of Frankfurt. So purpose of the campaign is to allow for a system where you have a series of linked scenarios and scenario generation, and where force levels are kind of persistent, where the casualties and such carry over from scenario to scenario, and the scope of the game is generally supposed to portray about 3 days of campaigning in that area. We have a point-to-point map for the operational map, with each point representing about two standard scenario maps. So each location will be set up in various formats of basically two scenario game maps, and so each of those battle areas represents roughly about 4 kilometers, 4 kilometers square, and then the campaign area is about 70 kilometers if I recall correctly. So it's kind of scaled correctly, where you'd have basically it's 9 points from the East German border to Giessen's out, nine locations. So it's roughly about 70 kilometers and everything. So it's not a historical based one. It's one where you would to start off, you purchase your forces based on the DYO's rules in Storming the Gap, and obviously players can tailor to how big they want the campaign.
Right. It is a double blind campaign, not a referee double blind, but double blind. So we sort of lean towards the Soviets are attacking. So the Soviets will move first, and they'll announce sort of where their moves are. And if there's nothing there, there's nothing there. If there's something there, then you'll go through the sequence to to mark a battle, and then once the Soviets are all moved, then NATO can move, and you can mark up all those battles, and then you can play all those battles. Could be a long turn if you end up with 5 or 6 battles. David, I just sent you a picture of the campaign map.
Okay, I'm trying to find my email on all these screens here.
I got you.
It's not enough.
Well, yeah, I have screen envy. I got one. So now, Devin, you had said you like campaign games.
Oh, I love extended campaign games. And I don't care what the system is.
Well, you got an early look at this, I know, and I know we were going back and forth about the rules because there were some tweaks that needed to be done at that point. Yep. So you didn't actually look at the final version.
I have not seen the final version. No.
Right. What did you think of what you saw so far?
I think that sets in just perfectly for what we need and what will suit the difficulty level of what World War 85 is. We don't want anything too difficult. We don't want anything too simple. I think this has got a very nice balance where people who can understand World War 85, enjoy World War 85, and play it for what it is, will be able to slip right into this with no problem.
Cool.
The one question I have had several people hit me up with is, and maybe Jeff and Keith, both of you could ask, how many average battles do you think will take to complete the full 3-day campaign on the Giessen map? Is it going to be 14? Is it going to be 24? Is it going to be 400 battles? You're going to feel it out?
But no, go ahead, good Jeff. Yeah.
So each the way it's set up is. You have 3 campaign days, and each day has basically 4 operational turns. So just in that, if you had just 1 battle per operational turn, that's 12. You're probably going to be averaging 2 or 3, unless you're going to go along a single axis and push everything down that one road. You're probably going to have 2 or 3 things. So you're probably talking about like 36 or so battles over the course of the 3-day campaign.
Is there any idea of maybe setting up some type of quick resolution system so people don't have to worry about fighting out each and every battle? Maybe if it's a battle on kind of the flanks and they don't want to really worry about getting it to the table, they just want a quick resolution. Is there any plans on implementing something like that?
We could do that. I think it's more. I think there's a. One thing about the concept of it is it's in effect, it's another battle generator. I mean, we have the battle generator that's straight points. This is another battle generator. So if you're just looking for battles, it's a great way to sort of do that fast with some, well, when do I add in air? Okay, I put in an air cover marker. I've got a little air recon, so I kind of know what he has there in that direction before I go in, but I won't find out till I get to the map. As far as, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do something where it's like, okay, look, I've got 2 companies, you've got a battalion, rate him as two strength of 2, 1 per company and 2 for battalion, and roll off on some little mini 1-to-1 table that we make, and then you're done. Absolutely. I think the point is to fight the battles you want to fight. So I agree with you in terms of this is one that's way out here. It's like my remaining territorial company and the remnants of my BTR 60 battalion, and I really don't want to fight that battle. They probably don't either. But yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, in that case, you may just want to retreat.
Yeah, so. Right. Yeah, you may just say, all right, give somebody the option to retreat. Yeah,
and we'll retreat off the wheel. So, but that's a good idea, Devin. So, and certainly it's something with our next iteration of a campaign, that might be a good idea to add on to it. It could be as Keith had spoken about, based on maybe the point values of forces involved and rolling on the table, and depending on how involved you want to do, if you have tactics kits, screen, cordon, echelon.
You're gonna have to write that one. Pull out my old 1776 cards. Exactly. Frontal assault, enfilade left. Exactly.
So that's something a good idea to something they add in on for like I said, the next iteration come down the pike.
So, David, we have any questions out there? He's gonna say there's nobody out there.
No, everyone left. No,
you're right.
No, I am looking right now. The way this is working, guys. The last time we had a hard time with all this getting everyone's chats together. Keith and I were literally bouncing all over the place.
Right.
There's something called Real Stream. It's basically a chat box. I did put it up on the chat preview for people to link on if they want to jump in and see how that works.
Right.
Someone's yelling for us to release Lock and Load Tactical Digital. We are going to have some broadcasts on that with Tom. We just, like I said, we all planning this out, and we're getting this to go. So there's no panic yet, guys.
We don't like panic.
Yeah, well, we seem to embrace it, though. Okay.
So, trying to think what was it as far as the campaign game goes. One thing about the campaign game, a little bit of the philosophy behind the way it does work. Like it's not rules heavy at all, because it's like I said, it's more of a battle generator. But one of the things that when Jeff and I were discussing this is because I have experience with campaign games that I haven't liked going back decades, and one of the first games I experienced was the Battalion Command campaign for Squad Leader back in the purple box. It was like typewritten on. I got a carbon copy, and I think it was from one of the guys on the team. I don't know, but I was too young then. I was very young then. But anyway, the thing that I played it, and I played other campaign games, and the thing that always gets me is it's the in between. And the one that sort of got it right was Starship Troopers had it in the General magazine, had a campaign game where it's in between because you got replacements in between. And so when I said to Jeff, I said, we're not having the phrase linked scenarios keeps coming up. And this is a way of linking scenarios with the campaign boxes. I said, we can't do that without some sort of replacement system. Because if I have, a company of 3 M1 platoons and I lose 2, and that's the company piece and it moves around. Now I've only got 1 platoon. That's fine. But a lot of casualties are not K kills. They're M kills, they're F kills, they're, stripping off the antennas or whatever it happens to be. It's something that's battlefield reparable. And I went back looking through, statistics and things. And I have a wonderful book on statistics on the Arab-Israeli wars. And the Israelis, for example, they in the 6-day war, they put a whole lot of tanks, like 50% of their tanks back online, if I'm remembering the number correctly. And somebody can correct me on that, within days. So these, if you control the battlefield becomes the issue. So I said, look, why don't we base it on, well, if you win the scenario, you're going to get more people back, but you're still going to be able to get people back if you lose the scenario, because I can't see, it's not 3 days. It may be attrition, it may be, but as far as game fun goes, it's kind of nice to say, well, my engineering teams are going out there with their combat engineering vehicles and actually pulling vehicles back, because that's what they're supposed to do. Because a lot of times I think the engineers feel neglected. But yeah, that's their job, is to get these vehicles back in action. And I from what I've read of statistics, there's a lot of armies that are really good at that. So that actually was one of the basis for, we have just a nice simple die roll of whether you won the scenario or whether you didn't win the scenario, which means whether you control the battlefield or whether you don't control the battlefield. And then there's a percentage based on, whether you'll get back, 1 step. You could be dead. You could be a dead unit. Whether you get back 1 step, whether you don't come back, whether you get 1 step, whether you get 2 steps. As long as you're out there, you're going to get that roll. So you might be dead for 2 days, but then you come back in. That may not be battlefield recovery. That may be actual replacements. And logistics are logistics. Somebody may argue, well, they can't get replacements back that soon. I'm like, I don't know, but it'll be fun for the game. That's sort of that border between game and simulation. But nice simple die roll, and like I said, things can come back, and that also puts in a fog of war that you don't usually have. I think the frequency of that was part of what we're going to. Not remembering my own rules. I'm the worst person once. A daily basis. So during the night turns, you'll get to do that.
End of the campaign day, you get your replacements and everything.
Right.
And
Right.
like you said, we wanted to keep it playable, keep it relatively simple, so there's not a lot of overhead, and you're spending the time playing out the battles and everything rather than
Right.
fiddling with a lot of administrative.
It's Mo. So if the replacement system doesn't work, that's all on me because I insisted on it.
Hey guys, Todd Reed asked a question. I'm going to throw it at you guys, Keith or Jeff. So
Canadian troops. There you go. As a matter of fact, it's going to be. We're just one of the things about running these on Kickstarter is the stretch goals can accommodate a lot of things that we can't accommodate in the main game for expense. And we're using a lot of existing, the materials that existed that we've, either revamped or torn down, built up, or just tossed out and need to be replaced. We definitely, the Canadians are on the board, basically. So they don't have a module of their own, but they are going to be in one of the Kickstarter stretch goals. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of them. And in fact, before I had this gig, I was kit bashing old MBT maps and the old World at War Canadians in a big scenario. And it was something like, get these bridges, these combat engineer bridges to the river. And it came down to like the last turn with some helicopters shooting up the bridges that were moving along. It was really, I had fun. But the Canadians are definitely on the radar.
This is so cool.
Who was that?
All right.
He wasn't a Canadian. If he was, he would have said A.
All right. Well, I'd like to. We have a little bit of a news announcement as I find out where I put the banner, guys. Hold on.
Nude announcements or news announcements?
No.
Oh man, Mo is on. Mo is on. Good to hear from you, bud.
Okay, thank you, Mo. Well, we'd like to welcome Devin to the Lock and Load team, and
there we go.
he will be working with us on some Lock and Load. He's gone already. Look at that. I introduced him. And he just disappeared.
No, just roommates moving around behind me. I don't think people need to see my roommates behind me. So I may do that from time to time, but I'm still here.
Okay. So anyway, he's going to be working on some Lock and Load tactical stuff. And Devin, you want to tell us the module you're working on now?
Currently, it originally started out as a Ziploc module covering Case Blue for Heroes of the Motherland. And Case Blue, for those of you who may not know, it was the 1942 summer offense that led to the siege of Stalingrad that destroyed 6th Army. David has informed me that we are going to make it a full box set, so I am rapidly increasing components and filling out counter sheets to bring it up to a full complete box set module. Is we're looking right now at currently 12 scenarios in it, 15 maps, 4 counter sheets. That may go up depending on a few things, and the scenario count may go up. No. 20 maybe.
No,
Stalingrad might have 22. But, David has also, on several occasions, discussed and pushed for the desire for a Pegasus Bridge historical module. So I'm starting to lay the groundworks for that. And this will be a little bit different than other Lock and Load modules. This will have a historic module or map to go along with it, not the geomorphic maps that we're so used to in regular Lock and Load tactical. It is going to be not as complete as historically accurate as the terrain actually was. David and I have decided that we want to keep the terrain somewhat even. We don't want to get to the advanced squad leader level of terrain difficulties where you have a 1-lane orchard beside a path that overall in the game might affect line of sight between maybe 1 or 2 hexes. We're just going to try to keep the terrain as basic as possible so we don't have to get into that mire. There's a couple different terrain types we're going to be seeing added, but it's not going to be the big mire that we see with ASL. ATF.
Oh, come on, where's the challenge in that?
In ASL, if you want to play that. So we're laying the groundwork for that right now, and I've got a couple other historical modules that I'm looking into, and there's a Stalingrad design that we're talking about working on that's going to include a massive campaign system. We'll see when and if that ever comes to fruition. But that's kind of what we're looking at for Lock and Load, at least from my end for right now. I know there's a couple other guys working on some stuff as well.
Okay. So people asking about different things World at War 85. So I'm going to go shoot through a few things. You guys jump in wherever is necessary. There is quite a few things available right now for World at War 85. Okay. If you are interested about the rules and what it has to offer, I'm putting up on the display down there. You can download the core rules. We're up to, I believe it's version 47.
47.
Right?
47, yeah.
That's what it says. Okay, good.
Yeah.
And there's a link right there on your screen that you can download it. And it's the full rule book. It comes with the starter kit inside, the charts and tables. So if you really wanted to print it up, copy those pages, print it out and play, you can. Okay. There's also a starter kit for the Vassal module for World of Warcraft 5. And you can play online. That's been available for a little bit now. And again, you've got the rules, so you have everything you need there. And someone's asking about the changes between first edition and second edition. All right. There's a lot of changes, guys. Okay.
Yes.
It's similar, but it's not the same. Keith was nice enough to put together a while ago when we did the Kickstarter list of changes from first and second. It's not all inclusive. It's probably maybe half, Keith.
It's a ton. Because if there's a list of say 60 some odd, which I think it is, some of them are small. Some of them are like months and months and months of work into one thing. So I do encourage you, like right now, if you have something specific you want, I'm happy to go over it right here and now. If you want to know.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, now's the time to bombard Keith.
And you're me trying to do a background graphic. It's not happening.
Yeah, I know. Okay, then the other thing we have is Gimpy. Okay, Nate Rogers. He has been doing the Lock and Load Tactical boot camp series, and he's up to I think 32, 33 already. And there's a link for that, guys.
Those are really good. I follow those, of course, because Gimpy and I work closely together on those. If there's any errors or anything in there, that's all on me. So Gimpy does a fantastic job of polishing these things, and they're nice little 2 to 3 minute snippets. Some are, I think there's one that's like 5 on something. If there's anything complicated in this game, that would be it. But I strongly advise you, if you just want to get like a little sample of, here's one little section you want to know about, just go watch that video and you're done in 2 minutes.
All right. And I guess this is going to be for you, Keith. People, one guy wants to know about the solo assistant.
Okay. I love the solo assistant. I love the solo assistant. It's based on, it'll look familiar to people who played with Lock and Load Tactical Solo, but since Lock and Load Tactical, believe it or not, is a much more complex game than World of War 85. It is a simplified version in terms of the options you do. And of course, it's queued to World of War 85 and Nations at War. Since those systems are so similar, we have a glossary in the rules that basically goes over the very specific terminology in World War 85 and Nations at War, so you can sort of translate the card and know exactly what to do. But the idea is that World War 85 is pretty much solo friendly out of the box. What that means is if your preference is to have random activation, that's what the formation deck does, is you basically shuffle the deck and you pull out a formation. So if you're one of those who, doesn't mind shifting gears and playing the Soviets in one activation and the NATO in the other, you'll have very few units to make decisions for. If you want a little more detail, that's where the solo assistant comes in. We want to emphasize it's not an AI, it's an assistant. It'll give you, an indication of what you can do if you don't know what you want to do. You can always override it. But what I find is that I don't override it because just like Lock and Load Tactical, it doesn't play like me. I don't think it plays like anybody. I've had stuff happen like there's a Scenario 21, which is snuck into the main game as from the Kickstarter. There's a lake assault, and the Soviets start in the lake. Now, if I have my M1s back from the lake edge, I wait till they come out and I shoot them. The AI assistant, the AI, it's not an AI, the solo assistant decides to charge the lake edge. Well, it turns out to be a pretty effective tactic because he blew away in a company, in the water. It's like, okay, it's just very surprising. And I think that's what you kind of want. You don't want it to play like you do. It does include, there's one little variation from Lock and Load Tactical, which is Indirect Fire, because there's a separate step for off-board indirect fire in World War 85. You're going to pull a card then where you wouldn't normally pull a card in other situations. And if the card says anywhere that you have off-board indirect fire, you fire off-board indirect fire for the artificial enemy opponent. And then you have the option of doing onboard indirect fire as an action. So that would be something where it would say onboard indirect fire when you picked a particular unit or stack and we're looking for a particular action. There's a couple ways to use it, and neither is wrong and neither is better than the other. It's really just how you feel. When a formation is activated by pulling from the regular formation deck and you want a little more detail, you pick one of the solo assistant cards. You can either pick it for the whole formation, which I kind of like to do, because it's based on, for any particular unit, it's based on who it can see. So there's a slight variation in that in any given company or battalion because of the position on the map. So it's got this built-in variety to it. If one guy's got somebody at point-blank range and one guy's behind him and can't see anybody, they're going to act differently off the same card. But if you really want to have it independent, you'd pick a card for each unit or stack, and it'll give you the action. But again, it's based on the distance from the enemy, and if there's no enemy in sight, that's where the system has options for you to do, where you sort of do logistical cleanup, go for the objective, that kind of thing. And there's one, in Lock and Load Tactical, there's a lot of flowcharts, because you need more detail. It's a more complicated game, and they work really, really well. You don't need that kind of detail for this because you're already down to one unit and the distance it is from the enemy, and the card's giving you an idea. If the card doesn't, because you don't see anybody, then there's a couple of catch-all tables that will say, all right, now start looking at these logistical things. And it basically keeps things like, all right, we're going to move guys on. Okay, we're going to move toward the objective if we can't see anybody. If nobody's in our way and nobody's shooting at us and we don't have anybody in range, we're going to move towards the objective. So it's just common sense kind of stuff. But it works really well because you can literally shift gears in the middle of a game. I was at the World Wargaming Championships and I was waiting for one of the playtesters to come, and I set up a scenario. I said, he's like, I'll be down there maybe within the hour. I said, that's all right, I'll start playing. So I sat down and I started playing, and the other side was playing the AA. And when he sat down, I said, all right, fine. This is your situation, go. And he could play it live, or he could continue to play with the solo deck if he just wanted his own suggestions. And there's a case of, we're playing 2-player, but we're letting the solo deck sort of influence his play to see how it works, to see, if it plays the way he plays. And it turns out it didn't. And it'll win. Won't always win, but it is definitely capable of that. I mean, if it throws you a loop, surprise is the strongest weapon anybody has in their arsenal. It's got that in spades.
All right. Let's see now. Okay. I guess I got graphics here from Keith. Okay. Someone's asking. Okay. I'll do this one fast because it's quick. I'm just gonna. This is some of the after the first two modules we have books we had on First Strike and Second Wave. These are the three that are basically going to be following up. The first two are done, believe it or not, and the last one, Edge of the Line, is coming. But Brad hasn't finished it yet. I'm not going to say anything about the books because we're going to have a chat with Brad on here in the upcoming weeks, and I'm going to let him discuss it. But for those who want to know what the books are, I guess, Keith, we're going to let you explain what we did there, why.
For the books?
Yeah, what's the idea behind the book, someone's asking.
Yeah, it's and thereby hangs the tale. So
Prelude to a miniseries?
There you go. That would be great. Sell that as
musical.
Oh no!
What I got brought on board. David, twisted my arm on this project, and I was not originally the developer designer. I came in to rewrite the background story into something vaguely related to the real world.
You mean you didn't want to have werewolves and vampires and the Pope calling another crusade?
No Monsters Edition. Remember, that's the rule.
Boy. So I don't even get to go there. There's nowhere to park. So, but anyway, I came in to do that, and I started writing that. And what happened was that we did end up with, we had to have a background campaign. So I wrote that up, and some of that's still being hashed out because everybody's got an opinion. Think of it as we wrote an outline for a story in the background, similar to Red Storm Rising, Red Army, just to have a storyline to hang the scenarios off of, to hang the campaign maps that tell you where the battles take place, just to have something to hang them off of, to give you that real world feel, because I think that adds to the experience. Some people are going to say, I don't care about that stuff and just play the scenario and that's it. That's fine. I mean, you can use the game for whatever you want, obviously. But for me, I had this concept of, all right, I don't know if anybody remembers Arab Israeli Wars. I'm sure many of you do. But they had a map of the Middle East, and they had designations where the battles were, and that was sort of the inspiration for the campaign maps for World at War 85. So in order to hang that there, it's like, well, where do the Soviets go? You kind of have to make choices on that, and it turned into an outline. And that's basically what it is an outline. And your scenario descriptions were written, and some of the people you see on the screen have helped write them. Scenario descriptions were written that sort of fit the areas where these battles were taking place. We tried to like move units around. Some people may object to where we chose to move certain units around, but it's like having a game of Next War, and you literally move the pieces around where you want them, and that's what you end up with. But it was just a storyline. It was just an outline. Along the line somewhere, Brad came into the picture, and that was David, bringing Brad into the picture there. I had read the original novel Stormin Steel that Brad had written, and Kev Sharp, thank you for that, because he posted that and said, wow, this looks good. And I read it, and I was like, wow, this is what goes on in my head when I'm playing this game. So I thought it was really good. I said to David, David said, I want to do some novels like we did the short stories for Heroes of Normandy. And I said, well, talk to Brad Smith. And he did, and they turned out, and correct me if I'm wrong here, David, since you're sitting right here on the screen. Basically it came down to, Brad's going to write the whole book, write it as a novel instead of short stories.
Yeah.
And
it's a little different. Keith really, really enjoyed his writing. And he kept telling me, you gotta get hold of Brad. You gotta get hold of Brad. That's in Japan, man. That's complicated.
I'm a complicated guy.
Yeah, I've noticed that. But no, actually, I got hold of Brad pretty easily through Skype. Him and I chatted, and he loved the idea, and he liked the idea so much in the universe. We took some of his existing titles, and he's really rewritten them. I mean, 2 of the books are not even the same from what I read. I mean, it's similar, but it's not the same story. Someone's asking about the characters. This was just us being us, really, guys. We thought it was fun. I mean, we hang out with you guys online. We do chat with you through Facebook and all these other ways, emails. And, we were joking around about, putting Kevin Sharp in there and Maurice. And actually, Maurice and Darren, who's our warehouse manager, they are in an army of 2, I believe. Right, Maurice?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
So I was put in the army for some reason. I don't know why, but
yeah, it's
well, that's demotion, but it's okay.
That's a pretty insufferable fate for you, I would think.
pretty much. It's kind of a demotion, but hey, what can you do? I will give honor to the army though in that book.
Yeah, Mo is an ex-Marine.
Yeah, so is Darren, actually.
Yeah, so is Darren.
Yep,
so
we're both Marines, so
that's the perspective. No disrespect to the Army.
No, not at all. It's just that inter-service fun.
Right.
But so we basically, if someone's asking how can they get on in the book, there is a thing on our forum. I believe it's in the World at War. I could be wrong. Where we're asking if you want to be put in the book to leave your name, okay, and any little details you might like. And then honestly, what Brad has done, and I think he's done a great job, is he's added people into the book and into the storyline, where you may be a main character in an army of 2, like Maurice and Darren are. You might see a snippet of somebody that you'll see later on in the book. And the real reason behind it is it's just fun. It's just like, I like seeing Kevin Sharp get shot in the ass, personally.
Well, the whole thing is you have to remember, one of the big things that Lock and Load is really big on, which is really headed up by David, is the community, is the sense of community, not only as gamers, but, kind of a gaming family. And I think this really adds to it another level where you're adding yourself into a bit of fiction and you're, a game universe that you really enjoy. It's pretty cool.
I want to emphasize you're adding your name to the fiction. You might end up as a bad guy. You might end up somebody with questionable decisions.
That's true.
But the link is on the forum. Brad Smith started the link in the forums for, give me your name to be, in the thing, because novelists need names, and it's just easier to have real names out there. If you have any specifics, you can do it. He can't guarantee anything. He can't guarantee where you're going to fit in the plot line. Can't guarantee if you're going to even physically resemble yourself. It's like, but yeah, it's just a fun thing to do.
You can't ask, though. You can't ask. We just promise you nothing. So just remember that. But you can't ask to be a Soviet commander. You can't ask to be a villain or a good guy. You can be a NATO commander that's a villain too. There's also going to be other types of stories. There's in the same universe where there's going to be an espionage one, etc. So, it's not going to be just all battles, but it's also going to be a little bit of everything. So you can kind of bounce around and to what you like.
Yeah, what we ended up with was this outline. I gave the outline to Brad and said, all right, well, this little micro section, because it's very long and it covers all the potential games at this point. This said, this is what's happening in Storming the Gap. It doesn't look like a lot, but if you expand on it, there's a lot of background stuff going on. I imagine down the road, and I don't hold me to this because I don't know. I'm sort of conjecturing myself because the novels I leave the novels to the writers. I get to see a draft, but I'm not going to say something like, well, no, that doesn't happen. It's just he's got my material. He's making a judgment call on it, and he writes really well. So, but he's got the background material, so we have this outline to like I said, a book the breadth of Red Storm Rising, but we're not writing that book, so we're writing down on the platoon level. He writes some really exciting stuff. He really does. So, I'm looking forward to it myself. I have seen the drafts of them, so I hope you guys enjoy them as much as I did. That's for sure.
All right, let's get Jeff in here, and Keith, and let's talk about. I've got tons of pictures here, guys, and images. You're just going to have to kind of direct me, since they're kind of sloppily thrown up here, what you'd like to. I'm
going to say just throw it up there, and we'll kind of riff off of it, because I sort of picked stuff that I thought people might be interested in. That was sort of on the periphery. I mean, everybody's seen a lot of stuff from the main game, so I picked some expansion stuff.
How's that?
So this is the Drive to Giessen campaign map. You're going to get 2 of these, one for each player, and then there's 2 screens that are the same side. One that's Soviet themed. That's this one. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. No, this is the Soviet map. The NATO map is comparable in blue. I think I didn't find that file, so this is an old file, but this is generally what it looks like. So if you could put the Soviet one back up there.
Soviet one? Sorry.
Yeah, put the Soviet one back up there. So this has that reddish theme. The NATO one's going to have a bluish theme with the NATO symbol in the background. But the idea is on the right, if you could see the Soviet starting boxes, and the left are the 3 blue boxes, not the big ones, but the little ones that are the objectives. And then the red roads are correct me if I'm wrong here, they're the major roads?
Yep.
Yeah, and then the black roads are the minor roads. And that limits the number of formation counters that you can throw down that road in any given move. If you throw more than its capacity, they become reinforcements if there's a battle in that square. One of the things that if somebody else is talking for a bit, I may go and try and find is the counter sheet, so I can show you some of the markers that get used on this map. Other than you're going to use, in order to mark your formations, you're going to use the headquarters markers from the main game. So when you're developing your points, you take that headquarters marker, and now it's a marker here. So when you're doing the scenario, there'll be a battle marker that you'll put on here, and you'll take the HQ and put it back where it belongs in the rest of the game and play out the scenario.
Now, who was the main designer behind this? Was it Jeff or you, Keith?
Oh, I get to blame Jeff for that one.
Oh,
but we developed it together.
Yeah. There was a lot of back and forth, and Keith was instrumental in developing the initial thoughts that I had.
I was just a pain in the butt.
No KGB, right?
Right. So, but Jeff's a specialist in very large scenarios and generating them, and had this design, and we looked at it and went, yeah, that's sort of what we're looking for. So we shoehorned it in and went over it. And like I said, it's not rules heavy. It's if anybody's ever played the old House Divided or the original Soldier King, which was sort of like the first box-to-box game that I remember, where you had road limits and entrenchments and things. It's sort of like that in terms of complexity, but it's just not that complex.
Jeff, what was your idea or theory or whatever behind this campaign system, and will we see it again?
Yeah. Certainly we'll see it again. To answer the second question first, with our next with the Blood and Fury come out, I plan on having a new campaign in that setting on the North German plain. But the origins of it was just the ambition to have a series of linked scenarios where the decisions you made in the battle are going to carry forward to the next one. You're not going to fight to the last platoon to hold on to that one town hex to say you won the battle. So that happens a lot in war, and that's fine. All tactical games kind of have that fate. But when you put it into a campaign context, hey, losing a company to take that last hex may not be such a good idea because 4 or 5 miles down the road they're going to have another battle and try to pursue the enemy on that case.
I'm going to ask Devin and Mo. I mean, as far as the fragility of real war game pieces. War game pieces are fragile. So you've got a formation, you've got a battalion, you've got 9 platoons or 10 platoons. You start to take casualties in the game. Do you commit it and burn it up, or in a campaign game would you actually consider pulling it back and saying we better pull back and see if we can get replacements and a better position? It's almost a role playing accent, but at the same time it affects your actual play. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's kind of, like you said, role playing. When it comes to the U.S., you're going to want to husband your forces as best as possible and plug all the gaps you can. And if you're the Soviet, you're going to just throw them at the wall. You're going to keep throwing them because that's what their doctrine was in the 80s, was just wave attacks. Most of the Soviet, that's coming from on high. Now, as it got down to the company level, company commander may be a little more hesitant to throw his forces in there. He may make a half-hearted stroke instead of actually committing fully to it. But the regimental commander is going to be saying, hey, you need to go. I don't care. They've got that attitude of men and material don't matter. We just need to break through. And whereas the U.S., the NATO forces had a little bit of a different mentality on that. But again, you drill down, it becomes a bit more human than at the higher levels.
And it forces other decisions. If you're running into a difficulty in one particular area, you know what? You may want to divert forces around it and search for that weak spot in the line and everything. So, there's other decisions outside the immediate battle that you're going to come into. It's not a full-scale operational game by any means, but when you have those forces, you have to utilize them efficiently and carefully count the cost on how you're going to spend them to achieve those objectives. So, to go back to the first question, like I said, was the general idea to have scenario generation, have persistence of effects for the battles, my original idea, like with the campaign map, was back from GDW's Battlefield Europe. The only thing I remember is it had a point-to-point map, and it was like a fantasy setting, like Graustark and something other, some other made-up country, and that was the first idea, inspiration for doing the operational map.
What would you say, Jeff, was the best thing that you walked away with from this system? The thing you're most proudest, happiest of?
So I think that actually the best thing is I had kind of let the setup linger towards the end of the process, with in mind having a fixed order of battle. And Keith saved me by saying we're just going to allow the players to purchase units with points. That's probably the best thing. That was the best decision on this, though.
Now, first I want to hear what Devin says, and then I'll have a comment on that.
Well, I think a lot of times when you're doing regular scenario play, be it whatever Panzer Leader, Panzer Blitz, Advanced Squad Leader, you have a set objective, and it doesn't matter how many casualties you take. It's just achieving that objective. At the last turn, you've got one turn left. You need to take that hex. You're just going to throw everything into it. You're playing a campaign game, and you're not going to want to do that. It changes your style of play in each individual scenario, because if you don't have any reinforcements 1 or 2 zones back, and that he's probably got another battalion of infantry, it's like, all right, well, we're not going to take any risks. We need to try to sit here and just hold until relieved. So it's amazing how it changes your perspective of the scenarios. And I think that's a great thing. Like I said, I've said it before, I love campaign systems. I live and die by campaign systems.
There's a couple of subtleties actually that are in the rules for it. Entrenchments, which is basically, improved positions. On the campaign map, if you don't move, you get an improved position marker. So you can actually slow him down while the guys in the back build a really, lines of Taurus Vadras position that suddenly, wow, he's got 4 improved positions. What's going on here? And they're tough to take if they're in the right place. The other thing is, somebody mentioned when Jeff said historical stuff. I'm a think outside the box kind of guy. I'm like, I want to give you guys something that if you don't want to think about it, you can go to the rules and you can argue about the rules all you want, but you can do it any way you want. But if you use the rules, you should get a basic setup for a campaign and everything. But you can see if you can construct, as close to historical. You're going to have a lot of pieces in between Storming the Gap and all the expansions. See if you can construct an historical order of battle, and you'll have, a certain number of companies on one side and a certain number of battalions on another, and fight it out any way you want. Set that up. Set up closer to the objective than you want with the different forces. The thing about what the game became as we developed it was it became a kit. And you don't have to use points to do it. You can just do it by feel if you have a feel for that kind of equipment. Set up whatever you feel like setting up, basically, and play it out. And if it doesn't work, you can balance it. A lot of what we do, what gets called play testing in scenario design is play balancing. It's not testing. Play testing is like play testing the rules to see if there are any holes in it. Play balancing is taking a specific order of battle and seeing if it, if it's fun to play, does it go down to the last turn or two, kind of a thing. And it won't do that every time. It just won't. It's chaos theory. You never start exactly in the same place, but you want to end up roughly in the same place, but you don't know what that ending is going to be. As far as campaign games, that's definitely the case. But, I think if people go strictly by the points, they're going to say, I don't have a whole lot of companies. How do I cover this front? I'm like, guess what? That's the NATO problem in a nutshell. You're not going to have enough companies to cover the whole set of boxes. So where do you cover? How do you cover? Do you have a collapsing defense? Do you try and predict which boxes he's going to come through? For the Soviets, like, well, if I put everybody in one box, can I do that? It's like, yeah. And then there's the little tiny airstrike rule that's in the game, in the campaign game, and he can keep dropping airstrike markers on you.
I got a question on the campaign rules. Is there
Sure.
any? Has there been any thought of using dummy counters in that?
It's a double blind, so
Okay.
you don't need the dummy counters per
Okay.
se. It's really difficult doing a double blind without a referee.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what we're faced with. Like, this isn't really a double blind. That's helpful. But the Soviets are going to kind of broadcast where they are once, all these tanks come rumbling through. It's really hard to hide them once they're on the offensive. On the other hand, you may not know exactly, does he have armor? Does he have infantry? Does he have any aircraft? Does he have helicopters? That kind of thing. There's a little tiny recon table. Again, small rules. Each side gets like 5 air recon markers. And you throw an air recon marker down on a box, and you roll for it, and it'll tell you got nothing. And the other guy is the one who does the results. So there's a trust factor here. But it'll say, okay, you tell him the types of units you have. Okay, I have armor and infantry. Okay, you tell him exactly how many you have. It doesn't go down to tell him exactly, I have T-80s because it's air recon. But I'll grant you could do that. But again, you don't need that kind of detail for this. But it might say you don't see anything, even though there's something there. So there's that. You never quite know what you almost want to get something because then something's there. But if you get nothing, you're just not sure that there's nothing there. It might have been the roll on the table. They might have just had a bad recon run. So it's and the other thing is that the air recon can get shot down. So it starts your recon starts to deteriorate. I've had when I was playing, it was like I had 5 and like I think 2 turns later I had 1 because I just rolled a lot of 6s. And that happened just like in the game. It's like you get a bad slew of rolls. So yeah, good question on that. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
All right, Jeff, going by that same vein, what do you think the thing you might want to improve upon or advance upon going forward, maybe?
One of the things that I'd like to maybe look at doing is maybe incorporating some changes to the maps. Right now, each battle location is comprised of 2 map sections, but in future iterations, we could probably customize the map a little bit where there may be some larger battlefields, or maybe some battlefields also include a major river crossing type of terrain, where it may be allow different configurations for the map. So like instead of just two maps side by side, it could be 2 maps lengthwise, and that may also affect the how the connections on the map.
Okay. All right. I got some pictures I can throw up here, Keith. Not Keith, sorry. Well, either one of you really.
Yeah.
If you want to explain what some of the counters are for.
Explaining is extra.
Oh, there you go.
Ah, perfect. Okay. So, well, the background counter sheet is actually the extra utility sheet that comes with the expansion, because when the scenarios get larger, you just need more of these 4 basic markers, which are disrupted, ops complete, out of command. Hopefully you don't need that many out of command markers, but it happens. And Rex markers. I'm going to dwell on the Rex markers for a second, even though these are the markers up front, or the campaign markers I was talking about. I want to emphasize to people that we get a lot of questions about, this particular tank can do this. And this is a platoon level game. So we don't have rec markers. We have Rex markers, because if you actually get rid of a platoon, you're going to have 2 or 3 or maybe 4, Rex. So that's why we actually changed the wording on the counter from Rec to Rex. And I was talking with our wonderful artist, Mark Von Marshall, and I'm like, can you give me multiple vehicles on this marker? And he said, how many do you want? And I said, 3 or 4. I think it ended up with 3. But that's the origin of that. The little things like that we kind of like to polish. And they're fun stories in the background anyway. But so the up front counters, if we start in the upper left, that's that air recon marker I was talking about. Each side will get 5. And as I said, they gradually get shot down. There's no replacements for them. If you run out of them, you just got to go with, ground recon, which is sending out a company to find out where the battalion is. The going down the left side, the second marker there that was a dial. That's one of the time markers, either for the day or the portion of the day. There's 4 turns in a day. Was it AM, PM, late PM, and night? Is that right, Jeff?
Excuse me. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The marker underneath is an objective marker. There are objective markers in the campaign game, but you can use the same objective markers from the main game if you need an objective. I don't recall actually if we finalized with the objective markers in the campaign game, because I don't think we necessarily needed them, because the boxes were on the map. The lower left corner. Oh shoot. I think that's the battle marker, but there's another marker that's very close to it that I'm not remembering off the top of my head. But you'd place a marker similar to that when the Soviet moves and he says, hey, is there anything here? And NATO says, oh, I do have something there. You put a battle marker down. And that way you can take the HQ markers. So each side has their own map. So each side will put a battle marker down. You transfer the headquarters to the map and the usual to the deployment boxes, and you start from there. Right in the middle, there's that airstrike marker, and there's a NATO version. There's a packed version, and you're going to get 5 of those, I believe, too. And the idea is that you can either use them and drop them into a hex that you have, so you can get your close air support in this scenario, or you can put them in a square that you do not have forces in, but the enemy does, and then execute a close air support strike against those units. And I think a portion of them get to fire back at you. So it's just, again, it's a very, very simple rule. Upper right is a forward operating base. We do restrict helicopters because they move fast in the campaign game. Basically, most troops move 1. Assuming, is it 1? Yeah, it's 1, and then faster troops move 2. Yeah. And then helicopters move 4. But they have to leave and come back from a forward operating base, and each side gets 3. And you can move the forward operating base like a unit, but you've got to start and end there. So, where they are is important. If they get overrun, you lose them. You don't have your helicopter forward operating base. It's, I'm sure they would find another base, but as far as the game, that's that border between simulation and game. It's a little gamey, but if there's no limit to it, then why have it in there in the first place? And then the last marker is the lower right there is the blue marker. That's just they're actually, that's not the final version. The final version is there are blue and there are red, just blank counters that you can use at your convenience to mark terrain that the other guy's gotten. It's really more for the Soviets to mark their front line. NATO kind of knows where they're going back to. And so that was a quick tour of that's a portion of the campaign game markers.
All right, here's some other stuff here that I've been working on. All right, so that we're basically talking on the drive on Giessen right now, right?
Yeah, drive on Giessen, yeah.
All right, now.
What's this, the honeymooners?
I'm trying to find. Oh, I got that.
One.
There you
it's my
go.
giant counter.
Nice.
How's that?
Oh, here we go. Okay. So hang on a second here.
This is Jeff's fault, by the way. We did this.
This is Jeff. Jeff sent this one.
No, he had the old game, and he's walking around WBC.
Oh, right.
Years ago. What the hell is that? He goes, "Oh, those are these large count." I said, "That's the old game."
Right.
So when we got back, before we went last year to WBC, I had Blackwell and Patrick make up these large things. We cut them all up on laser counters, as Keith was showing you, and we just made a whole bunch of them, and we handed them out. So, guys, if you see us at a convention, ask us about the large counters. If you want to put one in your, I guess, your show display that go in your chest,
Yeah.
And we bring them and we just give them out for people who ask.
Right. We're gonna. I have the last three like right here, and I'm not giving up the M1. I'm sorry. That's been my good luck charm all along. I've had it by my computer. But I say all I have left right now is East German infantry and a Polish PT-76 platoon. But yeah, David, we making more?
Yeah, all we have to do is take that and run it through the laser cutter, and it's
it's basically people would come up to the game and we'd say, hey, pick one, and you pick a favorite vehicle, and I was surprised at the vehicles that people picked. So
here's the
here's the components for the campaign game, and again, the blue and the these are the player aids. So you get a blue one, you get a red one. They both have the same thing on the front, which is what's underneath. So you kind of have the game tables, all the game tables you need right there in front of you, literally on the screen that's screening your map. So the left side, which is if you look at the red one at the top there, the left side there are the counter descriptions and the really quick sequence of play. I'm sorry, that's not even a sequence of play. It's too small for you to see, but it's a little table you need. But then on the blue one, on the lower one, on the upper right is the sequence of play. So you literally just read that off, and that's what you do. There's two tables at the bottom, and that's all you need. One is the recon table. It's the middle bottom there. And again, that that'll give you a description of what you find under a recon marker. And then the right side is the thing that, again, you can blame me, is the replacement table. It has two yellow bars because one is for when you control the battlefield and one is for when you don't control the battlefield. And then you'll roll against each unit killed or reduced to see if it gains back a step or two.
All right, guys, let's move on to one of the other additions in the expansion box. Oh, and someone has asked me, what happened? Why are we getting two boxes? Okay. What happened was you guys made the Kickstarter so good that when we
love you guys, because wow.
we were going to individually package each one of these three expansions and just let people buy it in general. But the box was so full, it was an additional £7. So we're up to £15 for this game, guys, just so you know. We decided that, you know what, everyone's always asking us for extra boxes. So we just decided to put this into a 3-inch box. Okay. And so you're going to get all three expansions in the 3-inch box. And when it gets available online on the store, you'll have the core game, which will have all the things that we've already gone over. And then you'll have the expansion game. But if you buy the expansion pack or expansion game, you'll get everything you need. Both those games, you have everything besides, I guess, the solo assistant. Okay. So if you want the solo assistant, that is a different box, but that we've already explained, but it also works for Nations at War as well.
Right.
Anyway, we'll go over Stormin Steel real fast and back to that cover. And you want to talk about the counters and the maps first, Keith?
Yeah.
Both? No.
Maps if you got them. Map them if you got them.
How's that?
There we go. Cool. Okay. So Stormin Steel was the novel I read by Brad Smith that he completely rewrote to fit the World at War 85 background outline, if you will, story. But he based it off of a real world location, all of the action in the novel. And I looked at that and went, he's basically described scenarios already. So David said, well, we need to have scenarios with this, in maps. I said, well, I know where the maps come from. So did a little map research around that area, and it's very densely wooded area of Czechoslovakia. West of Czechoslovakia in West Germany. Very different from the open, hilly terrain that you're used to on the geomorphic maps in the main game. And it's a whole different way of fighting because it is literally a knife fight. I mean, look at all those woods hexes. The other thing is on the bottommost map, you can see there's a whole lot of cultivated terrain in that valley. So when you're in that valley, you're not seeing very far. But on the edges of that valley are actually ridges, hills. So when you're in the hills, you can see into the valley, and the cultivated goes away. But you can't see past the edge of the hill because of the line of sight rules and the nature of the terrain. So you're kind of like trying to control the edges of the hills to be able to see in the valley. But as soon as you pop your head over the edge of the hill, he's going to shoot at you from the valley. So, and you just get closer and closer because, you have to cross the map. So you have to come through the woods, and those roads become very important, but you can't get very far before the enemy shows up. There's some very unusual lines of sight even in there because there are some hills in there, and you've got a completely wooded valley, completely wooded hill, and you can see over the woods in the valley. So, like I said, it's sort of a battle for the hill ridges, but it's real world terrain. Adapted for World War 85. World War 85 terrain. We do our best, but it's a relatively simple terrain model. So you're not going to get humongous mountains at this point. Although the rules were rewritten, especially the line of sight rules, to allow for us to increase the number of hill heights. Right now, there is one hill height. It's basically you're on a hill, you're not on a hill, and that's level 2, and that really works to emphasize that you're on a higher level on one side of the valley. There's a valley between you. That's sort of what it emphasizes. But in later games, as we explore some even steeper terrain, we're probably going to add more levels to the hills. But the line of sight rules completely cover that now, right out of the box. So you don't have to worry about that if there's a new map that you go, well, how do I handle this line of sight? Just look at the line of sight rules and you'll be covered. But for Stormin Steel in particular, this is an actual section of West Germany. I think the bottom map is the top, because if you took the bottom map and put it on top of the other two, I think that's the way it actually works out in real world. And but again, they're geomorphic. So if you want to make your own stuff, you can absolutely do that. But the scenarios take place on these maps as designated by Brad in the novel. And then we had a couple of, we basically wanted more. There was such rich material. We had 2 scenarios like out of the book, and then we decided to add 4 more. So we developed a campaign map around this area and, where the Soviets and the Czechs going. And then we developed, 4 more scenarios, hopefully that are as much fun. I mean, they were fun when I was play balancing them. But we had to come up with the Czechs, which is where we came up with their model for the Kickstarter stretch goals of adding in other nationalities as an expansion where we couldn't fit them into the main game for production issues. The Kickstarter stretch goals give us the flexibility to say, hey, we can have I'll pull stuff out of off the top of my head here is like, the Dutch, the Belgians, the Canadians. That's where the Canadians come in. I mean, in my head, I'm like, yeah, I got a plan for that. But in this case, we had the Czechs, and I'm like, we actually don't have an order of battle for the Czechs. When we were developing the stretch starter, before the Kickstarter developing the stretch starter, I was like, let me go do that research. But because we already had that process in place for all the armies we did have, it was really simple to go back to my sources, find the vehicles, and develop the values. So suddenly we had a sheet full of Czechs, and because the resources, we're using, I use the, here, I'll even give you my, I'll give you my secret, which is the military balance 85-86 is what I base a lot of the equipment choices on. I did basically take the liberty of saying, well, if it says it's being bought that year, it's fair game. So I added in some zingers. But for the Czechs, they have a really unusual order of battle that I think you guys will enjoy. So, they don't have, it's not just a straight knockoff of the Soviets. They have their own stuff, their own names. And I think you'll enjoy it. Definitely very different fighting the Czechs in tough terrain than it is fighting the Soviets in more open terrain.
All right. Are those not the right counters? Are they? No, these are the right counters.
Here we go. So this is. I'm looking here.
I know that these are. I know that was it Czechs or East.
That's the Czechs. Okay. So here's an example right out of the gate. The lower right corner there is the Dana, which the Czechs have a. It's basically a self-propelled, wheeled eight wheeled, self-propelled 155 millimeter gun. So it's got a huge amounts of indirect fire, but you have really restrictive terrain. So the choice is: do you kind of leave it behind and let it fire? Do you bring it up? It's an intriguing. I like the artwork on it too, but it's something that you don't get in other games. It has some hefty firepower. That's actually the reduced side because it has the white band on it. The Czechs also run T-72s, so now you've got reactive armor. That's the lower left corner. They also have the upper left, not the upper left corners, the headquarters. Below that is the Mi-4A Hound. So they have it, and it's got some anti-tank capability. Not a huge amount, but it's there. That was sort of the one they used. For the West Germans in this particular one, there are some West German paratroopers, and they do get their Hueys on the left side there, and third one down. So you can air mobile them in, or there are of course paradrop rules, so you can drop them in if you want to do your own scenario that way. And then you've got your territorials, and you've got the Fuchs transport, and some more Leo 1s. So yes, this is the West German sheet on that. This is the West German sheet. The Czech counters on the front. The background is from Storming the Gap, I think. So you can see the blue T-80s down there, or maybe not. Yes, that's what we got. Yeah, but the counters up front, they're all from Stormin Steel.
All right, we're going to go a little bit back to Jeff now. And hey, David, Maurice, you got anything to ask? Is Maurice even there? Yeah, he's there.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just covered up.
Okay. This is that you are. That is Defense of Frankfurt. Now this, I am looking to show one image of just the monster map, but I cannot find it yet. But I find I'll put it up there. This was for those of you on our Facebook channels and stuff. We had a little bit of fun with the map and copyrights and people laughing about it. But this is definitely not that map. Okay. And here's an individual breakdown of that. It's basically 8 maps, 4x4, correct, guys?
2x4, right?
2x4.
2x4?
Yeah. Yeah, that's because you have the winter on the left there. So
no, 1, 2, 3, 4,
it
5.
should be 8.
There's 8 maps.
Yeah, 2x4.
Oh, 2 columns, 4. Okay,
2
4.
columns,
2 times 4 is 8.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
You gotta break it down for me, guys.
Yeah, I will do that. So
okay. But we are working. Okay, it will not obviously be something probably more likely available before we release, but it will be one big piece, a monster map. Now, again, you're already getting the monster map. It's just in 8 pieces.
yeah, this is what you're getting in the game because these are the geomorphic versions.
Right. But we're all looking into printing one big map that's going to be on some very durable type material. I'm not going to say it's not vinyl because we don't want it to be shiny, but we don't want it to be paper because it'll tear and it'll be relatively expensive, probably between the $16 $8 range based on printing them up. But we're going to print them on demand. So once they're available, they're available. Once they're not, they're not. Okay, but we do have something I thought was really unique in this is these.
No, the one before.
I know, but these are the Stent information cards. I just wanted for those.
Oh, yeah, standard, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. And I guess, Jeff, can you tell us the value of the numbers and what they stand for?
Sure. So each of the cards is going to have your morale factor, morale level for each formation, and then the command range. The green on the left is the command range with the headquarters at full strength, and the gray on the right is the reduced command range for reduced headquarters. So most NATO formations are going to have a 7 for morale, while a lot of the pack formations start off with a 6 morale level. So which is used to test for morale checks and other such tasks. So
yeah, we call it a morale training level, and I know people are just going to call it morale level. It's fine, but just officially, it's a morale training. And there are people who argue with me that morale is the same as training. I just don't believe that. So I get to make the choice on this one. But morale is for how your mood is, basically, if you will. And training is for how well you're trained to use your things, and they both help each other, which is why we put them in that. There are some scratch force cards, so you can make up your own formations and just call it a scratch force. And some of those have a slightly lower morale. Some of those have equivalent morale, depending on the nationalities. So you do have a little bit of flexibility in that. You can make a better force, or you can make a worse force if you want to try that out. You'd be surprised. Some of the lower morale formations actually do pretty well if your die rolls go well.
I actually like the idea of mixing the morale and the training together. It makes a lot of sense because you could be motivated as hell and have crap equipment and still be a good, effective unit. Whereas you could be not too happy about being there and have the greatest tech in the world, and you're not going to be as effective in combat.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I picture somebody's someday going to say, well, I'm going to make up my own card and I'm going to make a Soviet T-55 battalion that has a morale of 7 and see what happens.
Why not?
So they may not be good defensively, but if they actually manage to get a shot at you.
Yeah.
So,
or you can make it situational. Like maybe during Bog, they're a 7.
It's funny. It's interesting because in the first edition there were many. There was conditional morale and encounters, and that got. When we went through the development process, we realized that was, it didn't quite work. So we looked at it and then we said, no, you just either you make it higher or you make it lower. So we came up with a system where your morale is either going to be 5, 6, or 7. 8 was there was 8 in the old version for some elite units. And I'm like, well, we're going to leave that for the leaders, basically. So leaders give you an 8 for a single platoon, basically. But if you're an elite unit, you're 7. But you're not invulnerable, as anybody who can attest, but you are really good and really resilient, and that's what that 7 represents. Think of a 7 in craps. There's a good possibility you're going to roll 7 or less. There's a lot of numbers, probability wise, on 2d6 when you roll 7 or less to roll a 7 or less. So it really is pretty good. And those elite troops, they should have that advantage in that respect, and NATO troops. So,
all right, now. I believe this is Jeff again. You came up with a very unique system to add to the monster map and the monster campaign. Can you explain this and what was the thought behind this and why'd you do it? No.
It's megalomania or something like along those lines. So even back before World Wars made, I played GDW's Assault, and of course when you have the table space, you want to try it out and spread out the maps and spread out the counters, and even with the first edition of World at War, I realized that the game actually scales up pretty well. From the small scenarios where you got one company against one battalion, all the way up to when I was making my own counters, I'd have a full Soviet division on the table against a brigade of West Germans or such. And while you're perfectly capable of playing with the normal activation system with NATO companies and Soviet battalions, or Pact battalions, I should say, to speed things along, you can move that command system up an echelon in command. So instead of companies versus battalions, then now you're working with battalion command on the NATO side versus regimental command on the Warsaw Pact side. So with very little tinkering, it works out pretty well. If you have the size of forces to support the upgraded command cards and everything. So.
And you will in Defense of Frankfurt. That's these cards are from Defense of Frankfurt. All of the formations that are listed on these cards are either in the expansion or in the game. The way the expansions are going to work is they are for a specific game. They're never going to require maps from another game. They're never going to require counters from another game. But because it's an expansion to an existing game, you do need the existing game to use the expansion.
I think we need to correct that. Okay.
Correct that?
Yeah. Because
oh no.
No.
Am I in trouble? You gonna fire me?
No, we don't let you go that easily.
Oh boy.
No, what we have decided, or we at least contemplated, the idea of making a game where you can combine the forces to play a monster map. It was something Jeff and I we actually talked to you about it.
Oh, you too.
But you were there, but I could see you really were kind of trying to lock yourself out of that part.
Was I eating French fries? Then I wasn't there.
Maybe. But the idea was maybe. But what we'll do in the rule book, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong. If we say you have 14 scenarios plus one or something like that, it means you have 14 scenarios that are in that game. The plus one is if you own another game and you want to combine them, or you need to mix them, or we're actually toying with the idea, just because we're crazy, of taking both monster maps that are going to be coming out, one in Blood and Fury, and of course the one you have now in Stormin the Gap, and letting somebody who wants to play a monster game combine them. Okay, so but it will clearly say, hey, 14 scenarios plus one. The plus one will tell you that you need another game. So it won't be one of these things when you have to buy 3 games in order to get all the maps together. It'll be clear, but the core games will be the core games.
A game can never be too big.
If correct me if I'm wrong here though, if you take, let's say, the Defense of Frankfurt maps, which are based on in one configuration on a historical section of the Fulda Gap, and you take the equivalent of hopefully what we will have for Blood and Fury, which will be in the North German plain, realize that if you connect the two, they don't resemble anything. They're just going to be a really fun play area because you're going to have hills and forests on one side with valleys, and then you're going to have the North German plain.
Is what we're partly idea was to take something where you can have what would it be, 2 by God knows how, no, it'd be 4 by 8 or whatever the range would be.
Right.
A lot more people to play at a convention.
Right.
Okay.
It's a little bit convention kind of
game.
So
it might even be a special scenario we design or develop for the convention that we make a free download later. But the idea is so we can do it. That's all.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Guys, what is this from?
Oh, this is from a completely different game. No. Let's see. We've got OH58.
Oh, the Frankfurt comic.
Yeah, this is Defense of Frankfurt. Okay, so significant changes here in terms of stuff that wasn't there before. In the lower right corner, we've got a 2S3 self-propelled artillery for the Soviets. You notice there, I want to point out, the upper right group is the high explosive attack group, if you will. So the leftmost number, the 87 in this case, yes, that's an 87, is the range. The 3 is the number of dice you're going to roll, and then the 4 is your 2 hit, and you're going to roll that number or above to get a hit. So it's rolling 3 dice to make 4 5s or 6s. But that range is 87. You're going to see some really long ranges for the indirect fire because we don't have like a split rule for indirect fire anymore. We just calculated out the range for the indirect fire units. And when you get the base game and you go, why do I have a unit that has, and you won't have the 2S3 is not in Stormin the Gap itself, but you have equivalent units that have that kind of range. Why do I have that? Because when you do a monster game, now your offboard artillery is your onboard artillery, and now the range will matter. And we've had situations where people have had, in the monster game, where people have had onboard artillery and it was just too far. So that's sort of why it's there, is you get to make that determination. The other thing is that they're in Defense of Frankfurt. There are not campaign rules, but artillery formation rules, where you have your artillery battalions and your artillery regiments. You might have 4 of those 2S3s. That's a pretty powerful set of forces, but there are rules that are specific to using those. That's one layer of complexity we did add in of, what's the difference between, when you move them versus when you fire them? How fast do they come back? That kind of a thing. Who can they target? Where are they in the command structure kind of a thing? And again, the rules aren't more than like a page, but they work really well as far as giving the artillery a different flavor, but giving them, the one thing that people said all along was, we need more artillery. And I'm like, that's a double-edged sword on a platoon tactical game. But when you scale it up enough, it's appropriate. So when you have a couple of Soviet artillery regiments and they start taking losses on the front line, you're like, what is the Soviet strength? Artillery, and you have it. And NATO learns a different kind of lesson about, maybe we should spread out. Go ahead.
I'd like to point out too that there's a differences between the NATO artillery formations against the Soviet formations. So NATO works pretty much like the standard rules, where it's basically on demand for the frontline formations and availability. The Soviets, they have powerful artillery, but it's not as flexible, and that's when you start using the headquarters / forward observer of the formation to be placed, and it can call in the entire battalion, at once. But there's limited times, when you can do it. So, while our NATO artillery state remains on demand to the other formations, Soviets are waiting for that activation on the Soviet artillery. So sometimes it's too late, and sometimes it's too early.
Yeah, I saw a comment from Hex 2 Red Alpha reading the Suvorov book Inside the Soviet Army. Yeah, that's a pretty cool thing. Yeah, I forget whether it fits the time period or not. I apologize. I haven't looked at it in ages, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff. One of the conceits, when you actually look at historical 1985 Soviet Army, is there's a lot of people out there who are like, the Soviets really shouldn't have attacked in 85 because their equipment just wasn't up to it. I'm like, well, what if there was a general in 82, I forget his name, but he's in my references, who was proposing, because he looked at NATO and said, we're going to lose unless we upgrade our army, amongst other things. And he put forward a plan, but then, the wall fell, all that other stuff. But if one of the things, since it's an alternate reality universe we're in, is I took the liberty of moving that particular thing up by 10 years and saying they've got 10 years of development. So yeah, the T-80s are going to be more consistent all across the system. Yeah, when you run into the Syrians, they're not going to have the T-72Ms, they're going to have T-72s. So what you see with the Soviet, if you see with the East German T-72s, you're going to be facing something similar with the Syrians. It's a different ball game, and it makes for a more intense game. And it's part of the alternate reality. Some people may disagree with it, but if that's the case, talk to us, and maybe we can give you values for T-72Ms, but I don't think they'll be much fun to play with. But I don't know. I'm going out on a limb here.
Was it Suvorov's book where he talked about, or was it someone else that I read in the past, talked about the problem with alcohol that the Soviet Union had, Soviet military did?
I don't recall, but I do recall someone telling me about that.
Yeah, because there are some, some of the stories with that really stuck with me as being pretty unique and interesting. These guys would do things like take boot polish, put it on a piece of bread, put it out in the sun, let the alcohol get soaked up into the bread and eat the bread.
Oh.
The other one, which is causing a lot of problems, was ground crews would work with their pilots. Pilots would go up, they'd call in and claim that they were experiencing icing conditions, and they were requesting permission to use the de-icers. They'd land, their crews would offload the alcohol, and there you go. That's how rampant the alcohol issues were in the Soviet military in the 70s and 80s. So
didn't need a still, just needed an Su-24.
Yeah. So that kind of goes into the issues that they had as far as, like you were talking about, the effectiveness that they attacked NATO in the 80s. Right. There were other things at play, not just the equipment.
Yeah,
I don't know. That sounds like some of the alcohol problems we were having when I was in the 80s.
I cannot even speak to that.
We used to have guys sneaking NyQuil on board, and that was they would distill the NyQuil down. And we had to set up, I was part of the Master at Arms Force, the guys who did the urinalysis checks, and we'd have to check the guys. If they were pissing blue, then they've been drinking NyQuil while we've been underway. So, yeah, it's just not the Soviet military that's...
Wow. Well, NyQuil's a great thing for deployment. When you're going to go on one of those 10, 12-hour flights, take a little NyQuil. Next thing you know is you woke up and you're in Japan. Hey, this is awesome.
Wow, we got off topic on this one. Yeah, we did. Thank you, Hex 2 Red Alpha.
Now, I'm gonna pick on and Jeff one more time. This is the next one in the series, and
you're picking on Jeff.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna pick on Jeff because there was a rumor of Soviet possibly paratroopers or airborne grabbing bridges. What's that rumor there, buddy?
Yeah. So. Hopefully, plans we'd like to make is get another monster map made for to go consistent with Blood and Fury in that setting in the North German plains. And our thoughts were perhaps they'd be featuring, to make it a little different than the Defense of Frankfurt module. Have the terrain setting a little bit different, and probably something like a major river, like the Weser River. And if we could take a section of that river and map it out and perhaps have a large airborne scenario. If I recall, several novels portray a Soviet paratroopers seizing river crossings. So,
yeah, and it brings back fond memories for me because sort of unrelated, but I played a lot of MBT, and back in '85, there was a miniatures convention, and they set up a scenario with MBT rules but miniatures of a bridge too far, 1985, and the Soviet paratroopers were holding the town, trying to get armor to them, and like that's kind of the way we're heading with this. I don't remember that scenario other than that, and I sprung about 12 ambushes and none of them worked. But other than that, I don't remember the order of battle or anything like that, but it was fun. So we're going to try and make as much fun as that was, I think.
Now, here's a question, I guess, for somebody here.
You know, I have to apologize. I have bits and pieces of the books I used for research, but to be honest, I do a lot of intensive work at work, and I kind of treated this as, well, it's my hobby. It's not a master's thesis. So I didn't record a lot of stuff, even websites and things. Was like I went and I tried to corroborate things, twice, 2 and 3, corroborate, get 2 instances or 3 instances of it. And some of those were kind of interesting. But I'll do my best, but I don't have a lot of books to put out there because I've been talking to people for 3, and a lot of anecdotal stuff that got checked out, but talking to people for 3+ years in the design process for this. And truth to be told, the places that I ended up talking to people, I never expected to be. So I didn't kind of record those references, but I'd go to them. So I'll the military balance in terms of, equipment lists was definitely my primary. Red Army for feel. By Ralph Peters, and of course, Red Storm Rising, and I was a fan of alternate history ever since the original, Third World War 1985 and Third World War: The Untold Stories, and there was a fiction book, The Day After Midnight, which was kind of cool, which was the only book of this genre that it was actually more of a spy book that predicted that the Soviet Union would fall, and at the time I read it, I'm like, pah, never gonna happen. It's the only one that came true. So,
and if I could chime in there's a lot of sources out there available. I know Isby's Weapons and Tactics of the Soviet Army.
Yeah.
There is an Osprey book, specifically a Tank War Central Front, which is a good reference, and there's a lot of sources you can piece together. You just got to understand, though, especially the ones that were contemporaneous back in the 80s. There's going to be some conflicting information, and you got to use a judgment call on that.
Right. Itinerant Howard says, I'm curious in all your research, what were the plans for NATO para forces in a Cold War going on? I didn't come across anything specific, but I can only think it was heavily dependent on how the air war went. Even the Soviets putting transport planes up, it's a little bit of a stretch for us to have Soviet paratroopers, because putting transport planes up in an 85 environment where there's still a lot of hot missiles going, it's pretty dangerous stuff. It really is. But you can fly under the radar, so to speak, not literally, and set that up. But the one thing I think I did recall reading was that they were, because they were the things that were going to come across on Reforger, because you can send, a parachute regiment, parachute division over faster because there's lighter equipment. So I think they were and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think they were designated to be in the first wave of reinforcements in Reforger, but I might be making that up. So, but yeah, it's as far as I remember reading it and just having the feeling of, it sounds like Bastogne, where, they just put them in trucks and sent them out there because they were the only troops available. But yeah, I'm afraid I don't have any more information than that. I apologize.
All right. I had something else, and of course I lost it now.
No.
Yeah, I'm flipping back and forth through all these screens here. All right, Keith, you gave me some pictures. I'm just going to stick them up here because I'm not sure.
Just throw them there. I just threw stuff up there to remind me. Okay. So this is a 2 of our player aids, and I want to emphasize our player aids. You should be able to use the player aids to play the game without having to reference the rules. But if you need to, the player aids have the rule references right on them. The left side is the new sequence of play. It looks kind of complicated, except it is the sequence of play, from the previous game, upgraded and refined and codified. So you have a step for things, whereas before it was sort of a narrative paragraph kind of a thing. And I know I was always going back to it, trying to figure out, because the specific order matters. So we just laid it out. It looks more techy, but it's the same thing basically. It also has the rules references right there. So if you need a specific, well, how do I adjust and or remove the electronic warfare and electronic warfare reducing markers? You just look at the line and say, here's the reference, and it goes and it gives you the paragraph or two you need to do that. I just like the idea of having the sequence of play right there. It's probably the one player aid that once people get the hang of, they just ditch it. It does have in the upper left there, because basically once you're in the operations, once you're past the initiative phase, which there's only one in any scenario, it's in the first turn, and I won't go to that right now, but when you go to the ops phase and you pull a card, it just tells you what to do with each card. And of course, when you pick a formation card, that says, all right, now you're in a formation impulse, and that has its own sub impulse. And then when you get to the action step, then now you have your actions. It's that it just sort of cascades down. Then when you're done all the actions for that formation and you're done the card, then you go to the marker removal phase at the bottom. So it really just flow literally downhill pretty well. But again, once you get the hang of it, you're not going to use it because you already know it. You might go back to it and say, well, am I doing my disruption removal before my missile reload or after my missile reload? Because it matters, because there's a modifier kind of a thing. On the right, speaking of modifiers, this is direct fire. Not indirect fire, but direct fire. This is all the direct fire modifiers. And so we've condensed it out. There were a lot of these were in different places in the rules in the original one. And when we rewrote it, we're like, first of all, we're putting them in the right sections. But second of all, we're going to have a summary of these things. And if you go to there's one section that has the direct fire modifiers, it gives you any more detail than you need. But this is the basic things that you need as far as direct fire modifiers. And again, once you get the hang of this, it looks like a lot, but it's like once you get the hang of it, you're going to realize, the one you're going to have to come back for is, is there a modifier for targets a landed helicopter? Everything else sort of makes sense. You probably won't use it much because you'll have memorized it. One thing on here I wanted to let people know, there is a volley fire modifier for the Soviet and Pact allied forces. It used to be a random event. I'm not sure why, since it's a tactic, and Jeff pointed that out, and we said, well, we should allow it to be a modifier. So it is in there as a modifier just for the Soviets, the Pact, and the Pact allied. Another one that's new is anytime in the middle right there. It says anti-tank guided missile direct fire at a target in a blocking terrain. So if you're firing, a wire guided missile at something that's in the city or in the woods, the wires that guide the missile don't really like buildings and turns and woods and branches that snag them. You break the wire, the missile goes ballistic basically. So we put in a modifier there, and these are just little subtle things that they affect the tactics on a platoon level, but they don't overwhelm, I don't think. But they give it, at least what we found is that you guys will tell us in the end, but it gives it a really good flavor for the time.
Another one I'd like to point out is the reactive / composite armor.
Oh yeah.
That's a pretty big one too as well. Compared to the old game, missiles are not the be all end all as they were in the first edition. So they're a pretty nice improvement.
Yeah, and again, they're pretty subtle, but it's there. And if you don't remember it, I don't know whether we phrase it this way in the rules or not, but modifiers are sort of optional. I don't know if it says that or not. If you forget one, it's kind of like squad leader. If you forget one, I would just go one. It's a gentleman's game, but or maybe not. I think in ASL back in the day, they said something like, if you forget a modifier, too bad. I just think you guys, if you're going to apply it, if it's a gentleman's game and you want to go back and apply it, do that. If you want to streamline it, just say, hey, I forgot whatever it was, and let it go. So the choice is up to you how you guys play. So trying to think of what else.
Oh, I got some more for you.
Yeah, throw another one up there.
I just downloaded it. Hold on, here it is. I think this is in reference to what Jeff was just talking about, and then I have the other reference for you, but hold on. Jeff, can you see that or no?
Yep.
Okay. Was that you talking about the reactive armor or any of the counters you wanted to point out something?
Yeah, sure. So, and this goes back to the first question about some of the differences between the old edition and the new edition. So, as you see the basic layout, you have the offensive firepower across the top now, so it's just a small change from what you may be used to in the old game. And then in the lower left is the armor movement, and then on the lower right is the assault factor. Some units you're going to notice there's a small triangle that indicates a special. Keith can correct me on it, but it indicates a special ability or such. And in that case, a lot of the tanks end up having either reactive armor for the pack tanks and the composite armor for the Nato side. And what it does is basically lower that save number. So, for instance, if you take on the Soviet side, T-64s, T-72s, T-80s all have reactive armor, so they're going to have a better defense against missile fire than in the previous edition. So, for instance, if you take a T-64's defense is a 3 dice at 6 against missiles, because it has reactive armor, it throws 3 dice at 5, significantly improving its chances of survival. Same thing with the Abrams. Goes from a 4 dice at 5 against missiles to becomes a 4 dice at 4. So, I know in the previous.
Yeah, there is as a subtlety. The East Germans have T-55 AMs.
Yeah.
I think it's the Czechs have, because again I don't have it right in front of me, but the T-55 AM2. And the main difference was it had reactive armor. So you've got Czech T-55s with reactive armor, and again in that tight terrain on the Stormin Steel second wave map, it's a different kind of game. You come up with different tactics. There's no, when you balance something like this, you just kind of have to play it because you have to play it because if you go and the first time you try it and you use your regular tactics and you get blown away, you're like, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But one of the things we love about this game is that it plays so fast. If you do make a mistake and you're wiped out in 2 turns, you've only spent 15, 20 minutes and you can go back and set it up and say, let me try that again. I really think that's part of the fun is, Jeff did this to me. We played the same scenario 3 times in a row. And the first time I was a little, lazy about my setup. Oh, I'll just put my Leo 2s up here and everything. And 1 turn later, I had burning Leo 2s and, nothing left to support them. And like, let's start this over again. And then we proceeded to have 2 very tight matches that I won 1 game on the last turn and he won the other game on the last turn. So, it's possible to have really short games and really unbalanced games if you're not careful about your setup. But we say to people, it's like, if you really want to play it competitively, just be careful. Yeah. Pay attention to your units.
All right, we only got 3 more things for you, then we're going to let everyone go.
All right.
We'll take questions if there's any. Keith, this was on. Nope, that was on. Okay, what is that? The back side or the front side of the?
It's the back, but they both go together. So
there you go.
This is the front of the line of sight example. What we wanted to do for this player aid was summarize all of the line of sight rules and also give you examples of each specific rule. So the one side is sort of the examples listed down the middle there, and it says, this line of sight is clear, this is blocked, and it gives you graphic examples of that, letter keyed so you can reference them directly. And if you see a situation that's similar to what you have, it's a real fast way of resolving, why it would be blocked or why it wouldn't be. The other boxes are, the middle top is like, this is a line of sight. Some people don't know. But the right side is your line of sight when you're on the same level, whether that be, on both of you are up on a hill or both of you are at ground level, at level 0, the effect of different types of terrain in between. There's obscuring terrain, which is things like cultivated, things that aren't tall enough to completely block, but that, over a distance will hinder your line of sight. And also like the edges of certain hexes, how you treat them. So the edge of a blocked hex, like a woods, doesn't block the first one. That's the bottom right example. But the second one will block the line of sight. And then above that, it's if you've got a fully blocking hex in between, obviously you're blocked. That's the easiest one. If you are on the edge of an obscuring hex, think of it as like the cornfields trailing off to the edge of the road or something. The edge of an obscuring hex is never going to block. You have to go through the obscuring hex for the second one to block, which would be the second from the top there. And then it's just, that's all the examples. That's everything that could happen, hopefully, at when you're at the same level. Now, the back of this card is page 2 of 2. David. He's frantically trying to swap the graphic. There we go. So this is what happens when you have a height element involved, where, you know, and a quick summary is in the upper left, if you're at the same height, if there's any kind of blocking terrain, obviously you're blocked. If one side is one height level above the blocking terrain, there's no height you can be at that you're not going to be blocked, unless you're, you know, right over the hex itself. That's the second on the left. And then the third on the left is when you're on a hill, which is a common scenario. Hills are at level 2. And then in the old game, for some reason, they were at level 1, and woods and cities were sort of nebulously in between. And that's one figure in here, is that situation. But we decided to codify it and say, look, hills are level 2. Does that mean we won't have level 1 hills down the road? I'm not sure. But it works, you know, to replicate the feel of what we wanted. We went with level 2. And it gives you the basic, you know, first of all, you have to be on the edge of the hill. If you have 150 meters of slope and you're 150 meters back from it, your line of sight's going to go through that hill. You can't see there. You have to be on the edge of the hill to see off the hill. That's the main conceit. And then the other things are just variations on, well, you know, if I'm higher than the hill, you know, like with helicopters or something, how high above it do I have to be, and where's the blind spots and that kind of stuff. And we try to keep it as simple as possible. And the upper right one, actually, although that's in the World War 85, is the if you're 2 levels or more above the blocking terrain situation, that's the complete line of sight rule from the previous game. So you can see how we've expanded it. Then there's just a quick summary of range. Just so you know, every unit in the game, whether it be infantry or whether it be the 2S3 with its range of 87, has a point blank range, an effective range, and a long range. Point blank being half the printed value, effective being the printed value, and long being double the printed value. Now, certain things ignore any bonus you'd get for firing at point blank range, like artillery doesn't need a point blank bonus, so you don't get that. They do get the penalty for firing out to long range, simply because no matter what weapon you got, it's harder to fire it farther. It just is, you know, for whatever reason that weapon may be.
If I could chime in too, one of the
Sure.
This is probably one of the larger changes compared to the first edition, and you know, the line of sight is much more natural, probably more congruent with a lot of other tactical games.
Yes, it is that. Yes.
And the game effect that people run into is you'll see there's a lot more blind spots in the terrain than in the previous edition. So you know, if you with the base game maps 1, 2, and 3, if you look closely, you'll see how they match up with Eisenbach Gap, and then the depth of the First Panzer map. You're not gonna be playing the same game though, because the blind spots are huge compared to the old rules work.
Yeah, you will see the maps with new approach routes, and we think they feel right. So.
Sorry, guys. We have one more. Let me just switch to that. This is the player mat, but the stuff on the player mat are in as multiple player aid cards. Is that correct, Keith?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to say anything about that. Really, not much to say. Player aid card, but
I can go over real quick what it is. You know, the upper left and the upper right, one's for NATO, one's for the Pact, are your artillery, your offboard artillery tracks. So you'll track the strength if there is a strength variation for that particular thing, and the number of strikes you have. It's just a simple track for that. The weather track in the middle is actually a little more expanded on the, if I'm remembering correctly, off the actual player aid, but it gives you 4 levels of weather, and a squall box and a mud box. Weather is based off of our new battlefield events, battlefield friction tables. And it doesn't happen all that often, but when it happens, it completely changes the character of the game if you get weather. So it literally is a way of making a scenario fresh. If you just want to take a scenario that exists that you paid 20 times, please play it 20 times. And you're like, I'm so bored with the scenario, I played it 20 times. Add in weather, and it will be a different scenario. Or use a winter map. By the way, the winter maps that come with it, so somebody's like, are there any special snow rules? No, I mean, you basically can use it the way it is as is, but you'll notice that there's no cultivated terrain on the winter maps. It's winter. There's no crops. So all those cultivated hexes, they're clear. So for example, on the Stormin Steel maps where you had that big valley with cultivated terrain, there's nothing there now. Now it's an open valley. Again, a completely new game, completely new map, completely new scenario. But as far as rules go, it's like if you want snow on the ground, look on the weather track. One of them says, there's different degrees of snow, level 1 through level 4. Level 4, I don't recommend. That's sort of blizzard. You wouldn't be fighting a battle on that, I don't think. You could, but it wouldn't be move very fast. But you'd pick a level that has snow if you want snow and just play with the restrictions for that weather level. That's all you have to do. And then either say it's going to be that weather level for the whole scenario and not worry about it, or say it'll change if it turns up on the battlefield friction table, which it may or may not. Like I said, there's not a lot of change in weather. Squall can also come up on the battlefield event friction. That's one turn of intense weather, which if the weather is already intense, it's like level 2 weather, basically, that comes out of the blue and exists for the rest of the turn. So it's kind of like, whoa, what's going on? If it's level 4 already, if your weather's level 4, and again, very rare, and you get a squall, it's actually when the storm lightens up for that, 15 minutes, the eye of the storm, if you will. Mud, when things get wet, Once ground gets muddy, it doesn't dry out in the, our conceit is it doesn't dry out in the length of your average World at War scenario, in a couple of hours. So once mud's there, and everybody's moving slower, unless you're on the roads. So that's all that from the weather track. So again, if you ever want to freshen up a scenario, just give it weather level 1, level 2, and see how it plays. Obviously, the turn track is in the middle here, just to continue. We give you a place for your formation deck and your discards. And then the left and the right 3 boxes, again, one for NATO, one for Pact, are the same. They're actually kind of key to a new flavor for this game. There was a variation of this, I think, in the old version, but it something wasn't right. So the top box is for headquarters and support weapons that are ready to deploy, and you put all your support weapons and all your HQs in there at the start of a scenario. And when you're ready to move them on the map at the appropriate time, and the rules for deployment are in the rules themselves, you move it from that box and you move it onto the map. So nobody knows exactly where your HQs are going to come on. Nobody knows exactly where your support weapons are going to come on or when. Once they're deployed, your support weapons stay with whoever they're deployed to. Once an HQ is deployed, it can move around on the map. There's rules for that. That's a big difference with the old version. HQs are never destroyed, but if you do reduce them twice, they go into the second box, which is the suppressed HQs. Suppressed HQs can't be deployed for the rest of the turn. So if their formation comes up, well, you're going to have to roll for a command for everybody. And then lastly, there's a casualty box. We made it really big because it turns out we did a version with a box the same size as suppressed HQs and realized it was too small. So we made a bigger casualty box. And that's the player mat right there. These are the player aids that you would put on the side of the map with the player aids that in the game itself.
Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to update on 2 little things, and I guess we'll call it a day. I lost the banner now. Okay, if anyone wants to know, the next one, it'll be Saturday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. We're going to have Blackwell here, basically going over the space infantry and asking you questions for that. So there's the update for that. People have been asking me about the shipping. Here's the deal, guys. The games are being assembled and put on containers. Once the containers are picked up and on the ship, which means it's out of the printer's hands, thank God, we will be going. It will be on a ship, and we will be posting, a tracking of the named ship or ships that the containers are on, and you can watch it across the Pacific as much as you want. And as soon as it gets to, I think it's going to be going to Seattle, then by train to Ohio. I think it's Cleveland, Ohio. And then it gets put on a truck and shipped to us. Okay. And that is the procedure. Now, how long is that going to take? Listen, I thought this would be done well over a month ago. Okay. So a lot of it has to do with there's a lot more shipping going on because everyone's nervous about the tariffs and the trade war, but it's just going slow. And for everyone who's waiting, I apologize. It was not our intent, but as you can see, we're basically ready to go. I mean, the warehouse has got the boxes, they've got the labels. It's really just waiting for the materials to show. Any other last questions anyone wants to throw in there? Okay, Dev, they want to have you do the shipping. Is that okay? Can we send it to your house?
There's a part of me that's been thinking, it's going to be coming in right down at the shipyards. I know exactly where it is. My old man used to drive truck out of there. I could probably sneak in there, get a little pair of wire clippers, snip in, get into the container. Not sure I'll be able to carry very many copies out of my stuff, but I'll try to get a few.
Bring a hand truck.
There you go. There you go. Just throw them in the back of my pickup truck.
Friend of you all.
But I probably won't get that many copies. So.
Well, it will give us headlines that you're getting caught like that. Boxes,
Getting a perp walk on CNN.
There you go. Showing up on live PD or something.
Original Grognard arrested for game stealing. Film at 11.
All right. Do we have anything else, gentlemen? Anyone else has any questions for us? I don't see anything else new, thank goodness. All right. Well, then I'm going to say this, guys. Start waving goodbye as we end the podcast.
Thank you all for listening in.
Well, that is all you have for this episode. Keep gaming, and may God bless you and keep you until next time. On the air is a Lock and Load Publishing production.